Hi everyone, and welcome to our teaching and learning video for today, which is part of our explanation topic, and we're going to be looking at the idea of opening the gap. So the first thing I would suggest to you is that in your lessons, we don't want to make life too easy for our students. We should make them struggle. Sounds mean, I know, but the reason behind this is that if we actually dig into the research a little bit, then we know that if there is this initial struggle to find answers to a problem before they get given guidance or obviously the end answer, we can actually see there being benefits to their long-term retention of those facts and information. So by actually making our students actually struggle a little bit first of all before we take them through, then what we're seeing is actual benefits longer term for them. And this comes down to something called the gap theory, which is kind of in your everyday life. You've probably experienced this, that if you want to know something but you don't, it's like having that itch that you just can't scratch. And in order to get rid of it, you've got to do something. So the same idea comes into our lessons. If we want them to actually have that little bit of an itch that they just want to scratch, they need to find that answer, we've got to obviously give them the gap in the first place. We've got to let them have that initial struggle first of all, because if not, they're not going to have that real kind of desire to know it, and it's going to be easily forgotten. So how do we do this in class? Well, it's a bit of a fine balancing act because you don't want to leave them struggling for too long, because if you do that, then they're going to give up and be all disaffected with everything, which is bad. But if you were to actually think about how to set the scene for this. So at the beginning of your lesson, ask them to make a prediction or an estimation about something using their existing knowledge. So it might be something along the lines of, if you're reading obviously a book in English, what do we think is going to happen to whichever character that you've been getting a build up on? Or it might be just, what do we think might happen if all polar bears went extinct? And we're not going to know the answer to it because we've not actually gone through that learning that day. But they've got some existing knowledge that they can draw upon and they can actually try to work it out. May not be right, but that struggle is going to help with this long-term memory retention. Second thing that we could do is basically create our lesson more like a story. So what we're doing here is we're, rather than just giving them the facts, we're actually going to tie it into some kind of an emotive hook. Because if you had something that gives you a strong feeling, you remember it better than something you're a bit apathetic towards. So if we just sit there and tell them this many people died in something, they're probably not going to remember. If you've taken them through it, and one of the best examples I can think of in my life where I've experienced that was actually when I went on holiday out in America. And clearly on holiday, I went to a great museum called the Holocaust Museum, because who doesn't go to places like that on holiday? And one of the things they did there was, as you went in, you got a little card. And on this card, you then scan it at various points as you walk through the museum. And it just gave you a little bit more about the life of this person that you'd been randomly allocated. And the last thing that you find out after going through learning all these little facts about their life from when they were born right through is what happened to them at the end of World War II. So obviously, sometimes they survived, but in a number of cases, quite clearly, you had someone who would have been ending up in one of the concentration camps. And you'd followed their life throughout all of these bits. You'd seen all these things that they were doing pre-war. You'd learnt about that as we went around. And then at the end, you've got that emotional connection to them, and it sticks. So if we can do that, tell a bit of a story, get them hooked into it in an emotional way, then they will remember our learning a bit more too.